Right, so welcome to part 2 of modeling the old school joystick. So as I said in the first part, we're going to model this part now. This kind of plastic extrusion sort of part comes out of the base. And I'm going to model it as a separate part. You could actually put this in to the normal map rather than have it as a piece of metal. It depends. More modern game assets, in particular PC and even Xbox 4 and PS4 games, the poly count has really gone up quite significantly in the last couple of years as the generations have gone up and the graphics cards, PCs and that have got more powerful. So poly or triangle count, vert count, isn't as stringent, as strict as it once was. Texturing is the bottleneck. So don't be afraid to add in for a game asset. Don't be afraid to add in some extra edge loops. If you have to add even 50 or 100 triangles to the count of the mesh, but the asset is going to look a lot better, especially maybe on rounded parts, well then just add them in. It's not a huge deal. Obviously if you're working as part of a team or in a project, you have to check that all has to be agreed upon. You might get a spec sheet with every asset you have to create, texture sizes, triangle count, and that sort of thing. So with that said, I'll move on and model this part. Now this, as I said, it's like extruded kind of molded plastic, and it's not much of a change in the silhouette, but I would put it in. I wouldn't just rely on the normal map. In future videos I'm going to go over this stuff in more depth, about silhouette and retopologers and all that sort of stuff. So this is just kind of an intro kind of video. Right, so let's get on with it. And all I did between videos here was, you can see, I just put a slight incline sort of on the profile or the silhouette here. You can see there's a slight incline. So all I did there was just after the fact use the scale edge loop tool. Sorry, I'll go on to this one here, and I just scaled the edge loops just in a bit, those three there, just to give me that slant kind of on the profile. So that's all I did there. And to start this off, there's a reason. You plan a lot. You always plan out, any model you're going to build, you plan it out into its separate parts, and what techniques you're going to use, the easiest way to do certain things, the quickest way, most efficient. So obviously the more techniques you know, the more options you have, and the more efficient you're going to be as a modeler. So in this case, this part here, I always try to reuse existing geometry rather than keep building new things, but at the same time separate out parts of a model that would be separated in real life. So for instance, the button here, the base, the top part, as I've done already, the joystick part, this part in here, they're all going to be separate pieces, components, as they would be in the real world. So we'll start off here, and as part of the planning as well, I knew there was going to be a big circle in the middle of this, so we're working across these two X and Z, the axis, and we have a center point here that we can work from. So we just have to rearrange a bit of this topology. So we can just do that with the regular move brush. Drop your draw size down, and then just move these verts out of the way in preparation for adding in this circle here. So back to the Zmodeler brush and split point, and just drag, left click and drag, and just drag it out to where, in this case, we're eyeballing from the reference. We don't have any orthographics around, so you're just kind of eyeballing stuff. And it's good practice to model from single images like this, because it gets your brain into a mode of determining distances, sizes, depths, the whole lot, just from a single perspective image. And it's good practice because it gets your brain thinking in a certain way. So for instance, what I'm looking at now is the distance from the center to this button because we're going to have to add this piece on, and it's very close to the edge, and also how far out this plastic is, which is quite close to the edge as well. So if I look over here, I'm wondering, you know, is there enough to put that in, and it's this close enough to the edge. So I think I'm going to go with that, because I don't want to go too close here, because then there might be enough space here. So once we have our circle in place, then we can go back to the move tool, and now we can just position them a bit better. And this also gives us these edge loops, this edge loop on the outside of this circle, whereas if you had to put this circle in with no support loops here, the corners of this circle would have went out to here, and then we couldn't add edge loops in. They would have ran through the circle, and then when edge loops start running through these shapes, when you're using subdivision models, it's going to distort the shape, because they're no longer evenly spaced and lengthed. Is that even a word? Edges. So these are, as I said earlier, things that you kind of plan out, but the more you know, the easier it is to deal with. It just becomes kind of automatic sort of stuff. So I might just pull this one out a tiny bit more. And now, with that in place, and that's going to be the outside, what I want to do now is just to come back to Zmodeler, and I'm just going to check that first, and we can see a nice circular shape, and we've maintained the shape on the outside without disturbing much by adding in this topology. So I'm just going to tag these, alt tag, and we have our double kind of axis symmetry on here. Hover over face and QMesh single poly, sorry, not QMesh, inset region, and drag that in to what looks good for the thickness of that piece, and maybe about there. And if you hold shift, it's going to maintain a parallel edge loops. So you can change this after, but I'll probably go with there, and that's going to be our extruded plastic piece. So now I'm going to QMesh, poly loop, and start QMeshing, but remember, hold control to break that away into its own element, and just move that up, and then just immediately QMesh after. You can give it a bit of thickness. I'm going to change this later on, and now if we can mask that and invert the mask and split masked points, and we've solo on here, so that splits that off into its own subtool. And if you're looking to find that, you can come down to the split menu, and there's different options here. So I usually use split hidden and split masked points, and while I'm working, it's handy to just break away subtools. So with that done, I want to get the this part in now. So an easy way to get that, as I said, is to reuse existing geometry. So a shift drag from a point. The reason I'm always holding shift, turn off symmetry, press X. The reason I always hold shift with the transpose is because I'm working orthographic rather than perspective. It's because you're always working to an axis when you're doing this kind of hard surface modeling. You're always working to an axis. So for instance, if I was in perspective and then I just dragged without holding shift, you know, you don't know where it's going. You can see it's up in the air. So just get in the habit, I always do, hold shift and now control shift in the middle circle, and that's going to duplicate whatever is unmasked, and it'll be in the same subtool. So now if we go up to scale and just click this outer white circle, that's going to automatically center up the transpose line in the center of whatever's unmasked, and then we can just click an axis here and then simply drag on the small outer circle, and that'll scale down uniformly because we clicked on that little white circle. So clicking on that little white circle, if ever you want to get your transpose line to the center, you know, if there's nothing here to snap to, like if there was a center vert, we could just snap to that by clicking on it. So back to move, and the next thing to do then is kind of decide what size we want this at. So remember, we're just eyeballing things here. We're kind of it's a bit of guesswork. So one way to check that is to turn off solo, unmask, and then I can rotate in Y, and you can see that it's over the edge of it, so you know it's a bit too big in this case. But if you look at the reference here, this is actually rectangular rather than square, so I'm doing as much as I can with symmetry on, and then I was going to just extend it out at the end, but it won't be. It's square across here, as in these three sides are the same. Sorry, this across here, it's centered up the joystick. You can kind of guess that from looking at the two corners here, sorry, the two sides. But if you look here and here, you can see that that's wider than that, so it's rectangular, even though it might be, at first you might just think it's square. So the distance here as well, you know, isn't that great, so I could probably afford to move that in a bit more. So I'm on move. I can just also press auto groups, and then with the transpose line I can just control click on that, and that'll just mask everything else. And then I can drag out holding shift and probably move that a bit closer. Press the white circle, scale, and maybe scale it down a little bit more and move it, and it's still, you know, isn't going to fit. It's just barely over that. But what I'll probably do, rather than, you know, I could always make the base here a bit bigger or just make this smaller, either, but these are things that you have to judge and contend with and improvise as you build from this kind of a reference, where you have to kind of improvise and make decisions. So I'm going to leave it at that for the moment, and just keep working on it. So what I want to do now is rotate this again, and I should have typed in the rotation, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to type in the rotation. So I'm on Y, and you can see that if I rotate it 45 degrees on Y, I'll be able to rotate it back then. So I need to just white circle again and make sure to auto groups first, control click and drag out the transpose, white circle, select an axis, scale and scale down, and I'll probably go maybe that size, and then I'm just going to unmask and rotate the whole thing, then just unmask and rotate then 45 degrees, sorry, minus 45 degrees, just to get me back into that position. And then move, control click, shift click to drag out the transpose, center circle and move it in quite close. I'm just going to solder that out again and unmask, and because I scaled it, you know, some of the thickness was lost, but it's no big deal, and I can simply just mask, control click to invert the mask, drag out the transpose holding shift and snap into invert, shift and drag middle circle down to move it down, and then shift drag the upper circle once we've snapped to the bottom again. So drag shift, and then we can scale it up. So I'm doing this stuff kind of slowly, meticulously, because it is a beginner's series, and I want to just kind of show the stuff, so I'm not just flying through it. So I purposely left that small so we can just use our clip curve again, and that's a handy one to get used to. Sometimes you might forget about it. So we'll say about there. And now to join these up, I'm going to use another tool I haven't shown yet. I could just use insert and just kind of put an edge in here with symmetry turned on, but instead I'm going to use the slice curve. So control shift drag, and if any of these other tools are active, you can just quickly tap control, and that'll bring you back to your selection, rectangular lasso, and then hold alt, and whatever's in the red circle will be hidden, but you have to make sure to turn off symmetry. So control shift alt, hide that, slice curve, and now I'm going to slice curve across here, and at the bottom as well. And now when I control shift click to bring these back, you'll see that masking doesn't work for some of these clip type brushes, so sometimes you have to hide the geometry, which is why I hid that. So because slice curve slices through absolutely everything, regardless of edge flow, and it just cuts completely through everything. It's a very handy tool. So now all we have to do is straighten some of these up in preparation for Q meshing them. Mask that, and symmetry's on, its mask the other side, and I'm just going to snap from that vert the mask first, snap from that vert to straighten that out, and then if you want, you can just do the same and vert that, doesn't really matter. And middle circle, move that back, and then we're ready for Q meshing. So back to the Zmodeler brush, symmetry still on, but we can hold down alt to tag faces. I'll go over that in the Zmodeler primer video, you can check that out. Just means that you can kind of group them or select them as you would in a traditional 3D modeling package. Q mesh is single poly, and start Q meshing, and that'll automatically snap. And then we can also fill this stuff in here, and it's gone a bit messy there, so I'm just gonna turn off symmetry and just connect these up. And that's no big deal there. We can just move that into the center, and then just hover over with Zmodeler selected and stitch, and then we can just stitch them together and move that back into the center. No big deal, and don't worry about the bottom because we'll be deleting that later on. So those faces were tagged, so you have to watch out for that when I tag these. It tagged these as well because symmetry was on across that axis, and it just grabbed these as well. So not to worry, you can just Zmodeler, and the beauty of Q mesh And while I'm here, then I can just polygroup a poly loop and just give that its own polygroup. Same on the inside. And now I'm just going to uncrease all. And now I can use this other tool here. It can be found in the polygroups menu, which is group by normals, which is like assigning smoothing groups in 3D Max based on an angle threshold. So default is 45. If I bump that up to, say, 70 or 80, it'll be the same thing as the crease threshold, where anything over 70, in this case 90-degree corners, are going to get their own polygroup. So the next thing to do is crease polygroups, and press D, and you can see, and we have our shape there, but we just need to harden these corners up. So you can do that sort of as you have your dynamic subdivision on. You can see where those edges are. So in this case it's that one there. Just press D, it's this one. So hover over that edge, hold down space, crease, edge, and crease it. And we can turn symmetry on again here, across, sorry, frame that up. I think it's going to be across X. And if Zmodeler doesn't find symmetry, I'm sorry, it's across Z. If it doesn't find symmetry, it'll fail, and a kind of an orange notice will pop up saying that symmetry wasn't found. So if I just undo that, just with Z symmetry active, and I'll just get out of that, crease that, and now we're creased up. And you might notice this weirdy bit kind of here. What we can do to fix that up is use clip circle center and Control Shift to drag that out, and you can see it's the same as the clip brushes. Sorry, I just thought I should let you know that if I hold down Control Shift clip circle center, open that up, open up the stroke, and you can see here I've square and center enabled. If I turn these off, it's going to drag out like Photoshop, like an ellipse, kind of a freeform ellipse. So into the stroke, turn on square and center. That means it'll draw it as a perfect circle, and it will start from the center rather than the upper left corner. And if I turn on the floor, you can see we can kind of get an idea, bang in the middle there. And now I can hold down space to move it around, just to clean up that bit. Sorry, press the right mouse button, my mistake. So I'll just move it over, and I would just move these. I'm just kind of showing this because I'm trying to just show, the different tools, and then I'll press Alt, and the difference between you can barely see that little shadow. So whatever side of the line the shadow is on is the side that the operation is going to happen on. So if the clip curve brush here, for instance, if I clip here, it's going to clip to that shadow. So if I clipped across there, but because of the nature of this geometry, it's not doing it. If it was a high poly mesh, it would just clip straight across that line. So yeah, I was just showing that tool. I would just move these instead, so we still have our axis on, and we can show another handy tool for moving, and that is the move infinite depth. So if you're orthographically snapped, I showed this also in the Zmodeler video, you can just come to move infinite depth, and it'll move across screen space, and anything within the brush fall off will be affected. So you can see there. That's also moved the one behind it. Whereas if I have it on the default brush radius, it's not going to grab the one behind it. So handy tool there, infinite depth, and I'll just turn that back on, increase the size of the brush, and you know, get that sort of a bit more lined up. Maybe drag that one out a bit and drag that in, and that's not too bad there. And we're still at our default crease level is at, sorry, not default crease level is at 3, because we broke that away from the other mesh, so it retained those settings. And now all we need to do is 45 degrees, and now because this part has come out of it now, if we try to use this white circle, the center now, you know, isn't right here because the bounding box of the subtool is out, extends out here. But no big deal. You can also just use this size slider, and there's also a different one down in deformation, and the one I have up here is from, I believe, position and size, and it's that one there, the global kind of XYZ one. So you can use that, or you can just use the deformation X, Y, and Z. Set your axis. I'll just leave them on all 3 and scale it down slightly, and then we can also turn on polyframe and kind of see where it is in relation to the other one. So we could probably even afford to just alt click on that subtool. Probably afford to go a bit closer to it, because it's very close to the edge. So even there I think looks pretty good in relation to the reference here. So that's pretty much it for that part, except for this circle here. So D to drop out dynamic subdivision, and I'm just going to slide some of these using, as I said, I'm trying to use different tools, and slide will just constrain to adjoining edges. I'm just going to do the same as I did earlier on, space some of them out. And the closer this is to a circular shape, and when you use split, you know, sometimes it will start to go out of shape, but this is actually staying in pretty good shape. So we're close to the edge, about there, we'll say, and that looks pretty good. And then what I'm going to do, and because I don't want that on the bottom, I'm going to just move that. If I turn the floor on, see the floor is down here, so I want to move this down temporarily to the floor. Just let it intersect that floor plane, the X, Y floor plane, and then just do a mirror and weld in Y, and yes, and I think I had the floor plane, let me see, floor plane elevation, so I probably want to put that back to 0 and move that down. I'll just undo that mirror and weld, just move that down and mirror and weld. Just I suppose that was a useful thing to know as well. I think I was working on something earlier on and I adjusted that elevation, so it changed to where the floor was, so that's why I had to just set it back to 0 and then move this down till it intersected, and now we have that on the other side as well. So the reason I did that was because now if we go back to Zmodeler, turn off that floor, now I can just tag these faces and Q mesh single poly, and when I drag down, not too sure what's happening there, it should be Q meshing through that. So what I'm going to do is polygroup island, and usually that means that something's wrong with the topology. You know, if you get weird sort of things happening like that. So what I'm going to do is, because this edge loop is running through here, it's having difficulty Q meshing across that, so you can just remove that edge loop from the mirror and weld, and it still isn't working. Increase all. Sorry, yeah, I have symmetry on as I said earlier on, but what I said there about, you know, sometimes because there was an edge loop running around here but none around here, it wouldn't have been able to do that properly, but it should do it now. There we go. It was because, sorry, I had symmetry on and there's nothing out here, so it failed. So that's why I went through that. But it's good to I always find when I'm doing these videos, it's good to sort of, because there's not really any planning gone into these. I just sit down at the computer, press record and start modeling. But I do think it's good to see those kind of mistakes and not edit them out. Well, not mistakes, but just it's all part of the process. Problem solving. So what I might actually do there, instead of doing that, is I'm gonna Q mesh down a little bit without breaking through, and not even bother breaking through, and just using this then as the button to break it away. So I can Q mesh a polygroup island. First I'm going to inset region, polygroup island, and just inset ever so slightly, Q mesh polygroup island, and start Q meshing, and then press Control again to break that off, and then straight away Q mesh up again. And now we can just use our bevel edge loop complete and bevel that off, but it ain't working because of this continuous loop thing. It should be working though. See, it's worked there now. So just sometimes you get weirdy bits going on like that. So just keep keep trying. So I'm going to do a crease polygroup again. Press D, and our button is too sharp because it's creased across those polygroups. So no big deal. We can either just get rid of the crease by going back to the Zmodeler brush and crease edge loop complete, hold down Alt, and that'll get rid of it. Get rid of it. D, and that looks a bit closer to what it is. So then, game asset wise, I would use this then as an extra piece of geometry to bake down. You know, that's probably too low poly, so when it comes to the final asset, I already have the block out down here, so you can just up res that, because that would be too blocky. Even with smoothing groups and everything on it, it just would be too blocky. And the same holds true for a lot of this stuff. But once you have the base in place, it's easy to just add in edge loops or remove them as required. And now we just need to and move that back into position. And it doesn't matter if it sort of slightly interpenetrates because it will be getting baked. And not too sure what's happening there. I must have moved something. I must have moved something by mistake here. I'm just going to go to top view. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but not a big deal. You know, just grab that, drag out your transpose, and just move it out. And I'm going to press D so I can see a bit better. Clear the mask, invert the mask, or you could use that move infinite depth. So just want to mask out that, invert, and kind of get that back to where it was. And lastly, this is quite sharp, but as I said earlier on about bevels and game meshes, just press D. We could always use that the bevel. So bevel, edge loop complete, press D, and get a bevel around there, and also around there, and around there. And because, and also maybe here, just a little bit too soft. And if you can also hold shift if that's happening to you where it's kind of jumping. So you know, that's pretty much it. A simple piece, but what I would probably do there then, you know, that's finished pretty much. So we could turn off symmetry, and then we know that this has to go out this way, but first I would cut that circle into it. So D, and then we could use that as a sort of a guide. So if we just solo that out, you can see that the green circle is kind of the outside of this. So what we would do then is just Zmodeler and Q mesh a polygroup island, and just it only needs to go down a small bit for the step there, and then we could just go to crease, crease polygroup island, just to crease that. And if you don't want this happening, just undo that, crease polygroup island and outer targets. So we just go to crease polygroup island, and then just where is it, polygroup border, and that'll just polygroup locally around the border of that, sorry, it'll crease locally around the border of that polygroup. And then we could also crease a poly loop, and I could have just did that instead of that and just did it in one go rather than two. And then just gonna crease edge loop complete and just control and uncrease that. And now, you know, that's our little cutout for that. And if we unsolo and grab this piece again, go to the top, now we've a kind of, you know, a better idea of the size it should be and where it should be placed. And we can see that it's out of whack there as far as it not being really a perfect circle. So we could use that bit below. I don't know how that got like that. We could use that bit below, you know, to work as a template, or or else we could also solo that out. I'm just going to get rid of this edge loop in the middle. Insert, hold down Alt to get rid of that. And solo, and then just rearrange them. So I'm not gonna, I'll do that between videos instead of, it's gone on long enough now for this part. So yeah, that's the second part done. So I'll fix that up, and the next part then, yeah, we'll create this bit and the joystick bit, and probably just finish it off then by creating these pieces around here using a radial symmetry and maybe insert brushes. Alright then, thanks for watching this one. Cheers, thanks, good luck.